Hello, this is Joe Neville. Welcome to another Python video, and in this video we are going to look at installing Visual Studio Code. If you don't know, Visual Studio Code, or VS Code for short, is an editor which helps you to write code and many other things. Now this video series is focused on Python, and VS Code is multi-language, so you can write Java, you can write C, etc., and you can write Python. But what it means is that there is some tweaking that you need to do to set up your Python environment, and that's what we're going to show here. So let's jump into it then. Here's my Windows 10 VM, which I used in my first video. If you haven't checked that out, then please do. I was looking at virtual environments, which is particularly important for this video as well, for getting your environment set up. I've installed Python 3.7 and I've installed Virtualenvwrapper, but that's it. Let's install VS Code then. Open up Edge, do a search for Visual Studio Code. There we are. And we have this green box here, download for Windows. I'll run that. Okay, then we have this license agreement pop up. Let's minimize that to focus on this here. So we've got the license agreement. Of course, read all of this, then accept the agreement. Next, I'm just going for the default directory. Install, yes. These are some useful options here. Create a desktop icon. Add open with code action to your Windows Explorer file. Context menu, yes, I'm going to select those. And register code as an editor for supported file types. I'm going to select all of those. Hit next. Then I am going to go for an install. Okay, that's now installed, completing the VS Code setup wizard, launch VS Code. Okay, hit finish there, and that will open it up. There you can see we've got a desktop icon camouflaged against the blue of the default background. And what happens here is we have the getting started web page is automatically fired up, which gives you a lot of information about how to set up the environment. But what I find with this is that when you start out, it's a bit like information overload. So there's so many options, and partly because, as you can see down here, you've got so many different languages that VS Code is very popular to use to write. So you've got Node.js, you've got Python there, Java, C++, etc., etc. We just want to focus specifically on how to set up a Python environment. I'm going to close that down. Close all of those down, fine. And let's just focus on Visual Studio Code. Now this is the welcome page. Okay, and again, I think it's a bit of information overload. So what you have down here is you'll see pop-ups. And I was having a conversation with someone on Twitter, and they were saying that the pop-ups were annoying them. That's essentially why I'm making this video, is because that was my experience when I first started with Visual Studio Code. I saw all of this information. It's all trying to be very helpful, but it was kind of overwhelming me with what do I need to do to just get my Python environment set up. So this is for telemetry. I'm not particularly concerned about that, but if you are, do look at the opt-out options there. I'm just going to close that down. So that's your first pop-up. So back to the welcome page then. I'm going to turn this off so the welcome page doesn't start up, because if you don't turn that off, then every time you log into Visual Studio Code, you get your welcome page. Now there's lots of useful things on here, so you can do things like new file, open a folder, etc. Then there's great stuff like the printable keyboard cheat sheet, which is worth clicking on to have a look at that. And over here you've got tools about setting up your different environments, some settings, color theme, etc., etc. But the thing about this is that this isn't the standard process that you would use. So I don't think that this is particularly useful for you to actually learn the settings and the workflows that you'll use with Visual Studio Code. So I'm not going to go through this, even though it does lend you a helping hand with installing Python. We're going to do that setup manually. So I'm just going to close that down because in the long run, I think that's better. Now, it comes with this attractive dark theme, but for my video, I'm going to use light theme because I know for some people that works better, especially with presentations, etc. I tend to write in a dark theme, but I do all my presentations in a light theme. So to change the color theme, go down to this cog here, which is the manage button. Before I start, actually, what I'll do is I'll make this bigger. So let's do a Control plus. Let's get that nice and big for you. Okay, fine. So back to changing the color theme. Hit the cog down here and you see that this is actually your route into lots of different settings. So you've got your command palette, your settings, you've got extensions, which we'll go into in a moment. And down here we have color theme. Oh, also I should say check for updates. So there's a monthly update to VS Code. That's the cadence that they've been using. You'll see a number against this if there is an update, and you hit the cog to install the update. So we've got a fresh version. There's no update, but this is where you'd go to check. Changing the color theme then. So hit that. And we see these are all the default color themes. And if you do up arrow, you'll see you get a preview of these. You get ones like this red, solarized dark. Very attractive. And at the bottom there, you can install additional ones, like community focused ones. Now, what I said I was going to do is I'll go to light. So I'm going to go for this light plus here. So light and light plus. Light plus just gives you a bit more contrast with the colors in your code. Fine. Okay, so light plus then. We have this toolbar along the top, but the main way that you interact with Visual Studio Code that I found is via this activity bar down on the left. So if we go through these, what you have is the Explorer. So just like on Windows with the File Explorer, to allow you to open folders and create files, etc. If you hit that, it will expand. If you hit it again, it will disappear to give you some more real estate on your screen. Moving down, we've got the search function. So you can do find and replace by the looks of things. You can do source control. This is if you are using Git, which obviously you should. I'm not going to cover that in this video, but when you create a folder that's covered by Git, you can use Visual Studio Code as like a Git GUI. So you can do things like push and pulls, things like that, actually just within VS Code, which is fine. But with Git, I recommend that people learn the command line because that's how you really learn what's going on with Git rather than using GUIs. Next one down is debug. So a bit more advanced than your basic setup, but it's a great function to have within VS Code. Possibly do more on that in a later video. And then finally, this is extensions. So you're going to go here pretty early on. Like I said, VS Code is multi-language. So what we need to do is for the language that we want to focus on to use our editor, we need to install the extension. So you have some extensions here. If we hit that, it's given us the most popular extensions there. So as you can see, there's over 12,000 extensions. Some are published by Microsoft, some are more community-based. We're going to go for, and the way that you search is just by typing in there. So if we were to type, for example, if we wanted to write some Go, we could get the Go language support and you hit that button to install it. But also there's things like, if you're looking for Markdown is another one that I use. But of course, we are going for, and it's the most popular one, Python. So this is published by Microsoft. Let's install that extension. So that gives us additional Python functionality, and you get lots of information about that here. I'm just going to close that down for now. So we've got that installed. Another nice one to just make things look a bit prettier is the VS Code icons. I like to install this as well. So VS Code -icons, install that. Okay, we'll activate those. You get this option here of those are the defaults. I'm going to go for the VS Code icons. Good stuff. Right, let's close that down and get rid of extensions. And let's write some code then. So we'll go back to Explorer and we want to open a folder. Now I'll show you how I've got my folder structure set up in Windows. If I go to, so what is it? C users Joe, and I usually use a code folder. We're going there and we've got my cool project. Okay, so let's open that up. So the way that we do that, go in on open folder. It's the same again. My cool project. Okay, so select that. Now we have that open within VS Code, and you can see the name of the folder across the top. And here we have the folder, and we can create folders in there, or we can create a new file. So let's hit new file, and we'll go for, of course, a hello world. And VS Code picks up what type of file it is by the extension. So if I was to type go, you see the icon change there. If I type py, we know it is a Python file, and then we get the two snakes next to us. Okay, so here we are, hello world. And what you'll see here is because we've created a Python file, it will be looking for, VS Code will be looking for a Python interpreter. And here come the pop-ups. Okay, so this is the thing that I think is a bit confusing for people. Now, the first one is about the linter that's not installed. So we've got linter pilot not installed. Oh, that's moved. Okay, so linting is essentially like code spell check. So it's great to have a linter, and there's different types that will check your code and make sure that you have written it to certain standards. Now, I'm not going to look at that in a moment. We'll delay that for the moment. Let's close that down. Right, let's look at the interpreter then. So the interpreter is our version of Python that we've got installed on Windows, and that's down here on the bottom left. If we hit that, it will bring up the interpreter there. So this is if we've got multiple interpreters, this is where we can choose them. So if you had Python 2 installed, it would appear up here, and you could choose between them for this Python environment. Now, if you checked out my first couple of videos, I was talking about the importance of using virtual environments so that you're not just installing all of your packages onto the global install of Python. So for our new project, I would recommend that we use a virtual environment to keep everything nice and compartmentalized, keep it nice and tidy. Now, how do we create the interpreter and get it linked in to VS Code? We could jump out of VS Code and use a terminal, but what I'm going to do is use the built-in terminal. Great thing about this is if you're working off a single screen, like if you're using a laptop, for example, you can just use VS Code maximized, and you can get access to lots of the tools that you'll need for your development environment, including a built-in terminal. So for the eagle-eyed, you'll see up the top here, we've got terminals. So I can open that, and you've got the shortcut there for it. So new terminal, let's open that up. And here it is. So it's a standard PowerShell. So if you want to enter commands like it, you don't have to just do code commands. If you do like an ipconfig, etc., you can do SSH off of this. So I can just sit in VS Code and I can configure my switch. Okay, let's clear that off. Now what I'm going to do then, I'm going to create a virtual environment manually. So that's Python-M VM, and I'm going to call it Hello World. Let's create that. And down here you'll see we noticed a new virtual environment has been created. Do you want to select it for the workspace folder? So I'm going to say no at this point because I want to do it manually. But you can see that the functionality is within VS Code to be able to pick up your virtual environments like that. Now let's do this manually then. So we want to select the virtual environment. If I hit that bottom left, you'll see at the top here, there's my Hello World virtual environment. So I can select the global or I can select the Hello World. Let's select that, and you'll also see over here in my project there's the actual folder with the binaries, etc., for hello world. Okay, and we've got that linting warning again, and it's telling us PyLint is not installed. Now I'm not going to use PyLint, I'm going to use pep8. Now that's not going to be installed either, so the message, the pop-up changes. Linter pep8 is not installed. If we hit this, it will go and install it for us. Now what I have noticed is that you get this warning, but that's because PowerShell can't run scripts on this Windows VM by default. But what it does is it just takes a different approach to install it, and it is successfully installed here into my environment. So now I've got my linter installed. Let's close this down. Clear this off, sorry, and I will minimize that. Let's give ourselves some more real estate then by getting rid of that, and let's do a simple program. So do message equals hello world, and I'll go print message. Okay, now you may have noticed that there's a dot up here. Now that, and also a 1 over here, and what that means is that this file is not saved at the moment. Autosave is not on by default with VS Code. To change that, go to File, and there you go, Auto Save. So I hit that, and if I make any changes to the document, you'll see that you don't get the dot, you don't get the 1, because this is automatically being saved, which is really useful. Let's go ahead and run my simple hello world program then, and you don't need to drop out of VS Code, you don't need to use the terminal for this. You can do a right click, and if you look down here, you can see run Python file in terminal. The other one is run selection line in Python terminal. So this runs your whole Python file, and this one, if you highlight and right click, it's the selection that will be run. So if you want to run just a selection of the screen, or if you want to run the full file. So let's run the whole file here. And it runs within the virtual environment that we've got, the hello world virtual environment, and then it's printed to screen like that. Let's bring this up a little bit for you. Okay, so if we look at over here, you can see that there's a problem, and one of the problems is blank line at the end of the file, because this is our linter telling us that we're non-compliant with one of the rules of the pep8 linter. We can also change it by doing things like, this will give us some errors as well. So there you can see we've got two problems, and it tells us what the problem is. Missing white space around operator, the operator being the equal sign there. If we highlight that, it will actually tell us where the problem is. So this is really useful if you've got a large program and then you've got different problems. You can highlight them and it will show you where the problems in your code are. These are just formatting problems. So the file will still run if we, there we go, if we change that, if we run that, we still get hello world, but this is formatting and linting, which is telling us we need to change that. So if we go, let's get rid of these problems then. And also the blank, like you see, I've put the space around the operator. Now the problem has disappeared. And if I do, so it's blank line at the end of the file. If I press enter there, then now we've got no problems. So that's great. It's nice and clean and we're compliant with pep8. Run that in the terminal. Fine. You'll notice that I ran that manually, and that can be, if you've got lots of issues like this, it can be quite time consuming to actually go through and manually change them. So there's a tool that you can use, there's formatting tools that you can use to automatically do that for you, and you can link those into VS Code. So VS Code will run the formatter for you. Now, how we do that is we need to open up the command palette. If we come down here and open up the command palette and I write format, you'll see format document. So that's not Python specific, but it will pick it up that we want a formatter for Python. And we've got this option here. So formatter auto pep8 is not installed. You want to install it. Now, another really popular It's quite recent and very popular formatter is black. So lots of people are using black. Now that's what I'm going to use here. So I'm going to hit the use black box. Okay, and that goes off and it downloads and installs black for us. So you can see we're making these shortcuts. We didn't even have to go and find black to install it. VS Code goes and does that for us. Now what we want to do is we want to run black against this file here. Now if I right click, you can see format document. You've got format document with, or you can just run format document. So we run that, and as you can see, it put the spaces around the operator, it's taken out the blank line, and our problems have gone. If I quickly just do that again for you, I'll take away the white space again, format document, and the problems disappear. Okay, great. So that's the power of using linting to tell you where the problems are, and then you can use a formatter to actually automatically make those changes for you, make your code easier to read. Now another option is if we want to have, let's create another file. So we hit that and we'll go hello2.py. And imagine I want to work side by side. We'll close down the editor then. Imagine if I want both of my files on screen at once. What I can do is we go over to the top right here, split editor right, and that will split that across. I can close that version down, and then I have hello world here and hello world 2 over here. So I can do things like copy this across. Let's copy that across. We'll go hello world 2. And then so if I put my cursor in hello world.py, right click, we'll get hello world. And if I do over on the right there, run Python file in terminal, I get hello world 2. You can have multiple of these, so you can split that out and have 3 or 4, etc. Okay, let's close that down. Now I did show you the command palette there. The command palette has a huge amount of actions that you can run. If you want the Python specific ones, just type Python and those will come up there. So it has things like run the Python file in terminal. Now we can get to that via the right click as I've shown you, or you can use the command palette. So right click is obviously quicker. Selecting the interpreter and things like that. So if I connect that, that will bring that back up rather than there's multiple routes to do the same action. The other thing that we have available here is settings. So this is different because this is the actual settings. I'll close down the terminal there so you can see this. Then you have this GUI for the settings. So we have commonly used like autosave. I've got autosave on after delay. You can change that to off, which is the default, and it tells you there you've got the default on focus change, on window change, etc. You can change the font size. This is where all of the settings are. Now, if you go to, if we go to extensions, if you want the Python specific ones, you can go into Python here and you'll get the Python specific settings. I'm not going to cover any more of those in this video for now, so let's close that down. And the final thing that I'd like to show you, which did confuse me to start with, but is actually pretty easy and really useful, are workspaces. So imagine you have multiple projects on your computer and you'd like to have a look at some Python code or another file that's in a different folder. You could go to File, Open Folder, and I've created this second project, so project 2. Imagine there's some Python in there that we want to look at side by side. So if we select that, what does VS Code do? Well, it actually completely flips the folder to project 2. And in project 2, I've got hello2 and I've got a .py file of hello2. And you see the pop-ups are popping up again because we don't have the same interpreter linked to this folder. So that's not exactly what I was looking for. And you could say, okay, well, both of these folders are within the code folder, so we can just use the hierarchy to our advantage. We could open folder, go up one level to code, select that, and that will have both of the projects. So if we bring up hello world. We can split that across. We could also have hello 2 in a completely separate folder alongside, so we could compare those and run them separately. But what if your projects and your files are in a completely different part of your OS, not in the same hierarchy? How would you get to those? Well, that's where Workspaces come in. So let's go back to our original. We'll go open folder, and I will go back to my cool project. And I've got a different folder. I'll show you in the file explorer where it is. If I go see users, I put it in public so it's not in the same place, document. So my other project, that's the folder that I want to open. Okay, so how do we do that? Because selecting the folder will just flip between. What we do is we go to file and we go add folder to workspace. So select that. And we go find that again. Documents. So this is the folder that we're going to add into the workspace. And then rather than flipping the folders, we stay on hello world in my cool project. We also bring in this new folder and we create an untitled workspace. So we're now free to create Python files in a completely separate folder, but in the same workspace. So you'll get these pop-ups again because it doesn't have the interpreter. You can select the interpreter there, and we can split that across. So we can have Python files in completely separate folders, side by side, in the same workspace. And let's run that. There we go, great. So we've got our Hello World 3. And if you want to link those folders together in the workspace, if we go over to File and we do Save Workspace As, we'll call it My Workspace 1. Save that. If we were to entirely close this down, so close Workspace, and maybe we shut down, we boot up the next day, and we want to start again where we left off, we can now open a well, you can go to open recent, and that will bring the workspace. There you can see workspace. We can just go open workspace, and it was in my other project. So there we are. That will open up the workspace for us. And if you want to remove the folder from the workspace, we can just go there, remove folder from workspace, and we're back to just my cool project. So I did find that very useful when you've got quite a lot, when you've got multiple projects on your OS in different areas, allowing you to bring them. So that, and the main driver being that everything can be done single screen. So multiple folders, terminal, you can also run, as I said, like your Git debug, etc., all on the same screen, all on a single laptop screen. Oh, and before I forget, the actual, real, honest to goodness final thing that I'm going to show you is if you're using Virtual Environment Wrapper, can VS Code pick those virtual environments up? Remember from my first video, those virtual environments are consolidated rather than sitting in the actual project. They're in a centralized place. Well, yes, VS Code can pick those up. So let's create a new one. We'll open up a terminal. Get that right. And we go make virtual env, and I'll call it vhello. Fire that off. And once that's done, if we click down here, VS Code won't pick it up, but if you close off, I found if you exit out of VS Code, then open it up again, so we're back in our Michael project. It loads the extensions. If we select there you can see it has picked up the environment on a different path. So we can now select vhello within VS Code. So it's another nice thing about VS Code that it has got this built-in functionality, which also picks up, so what did we see? We saw it picked up formatting with black, you've got PEP8, you've got awareness of virtual environment wrapper, centralized virtual environments. So it's a really good, really powerful tool when you're writing your Python code. Hope you found that useful then. So that was a whistle-stop tour through the first 5 to 10 minutes of setting up VS Code for Python. Please like, subscribe, comment. If you need any extra pointers on this, please do let me know. Always looking for feedback, good and bad. But that's all for now. Thanks very much for watching. My name is Joe Neville, and goodbye.